afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our October QualiWare Users Group meeting. My name is Cecile, and I will be your host for today. I'm going to go through the agenda first, and then I'll do a little bit of intro and housekeeping. I'm going to hand things over at that point to JR from ESDC, and JR is going to give us a customer update and talk to us about ESDC's release management process. Then in our new in QualiWare section, we'll have Dragos talking to us about spreadsheets. In the tech corner, Andrew Stephen will be presenting about Archimate and QualiWare. Then we've got some CloseReach news, and then we've got open forum for everybody to talk amongst yourselves, ask questions, chit chat, etc. Some new faces here and some, I was going to say old faces, but that's not what I meant. Familiar faces and some new faces. So I'll just go through housekeeping with everybody very quickly, just in case there's new folks on the call who've not heard my spiel before. I've given everybody the access to have your cameras and your microphones on. You can choose to have your cameras off or on, it's up to you. But I would ask that you keep your microphones on mute while we're doing presentations, just to minimize the background noise. Also be aware that this meeting is being recorded and it will be made publicly available afterwards. So if you don't want to have your voice or your video recorded, then it's now time for you to leave this meeting because you are being recorded. Last month, we went through participants on the call and people introduced themselves and the departments that they were with, etc. And I wasn't on that meeting, but I heard feedback afterwards that we don't want to do that every month. We're going to do that maybe every second month. So this month, we're not going to go through the complete list of everyone who's on the call. I would ask, though, and I'll pause here for a moment before we move on to our first speaker, if there's anybody new on the call today who hasn't been with us before, if you'd like to say hello, feel free to raise your hand and take yourself off mute and say hello. Denise, are you raising your hand to say hi?
Hi, yes.
Hi.
I'm with PSPC. I only started with them in August, and I'm now their QualiWare support. I'm originally from SSC by way of Health Canada, PSPC, PWGSC, and a whole list of other departments.
Okay, great. Well, that's great. It's good to have you as part of our fun group. You'll find out that we're fun. At least I hope you find out that we're fun. And I hope you're able to participate in the meetings, and we'll look forward to having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else that wants to say hello?
Peter.
Going once. You're on mute though, Peter, now that Kevin's called you out.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Greenwood. I used to teach QualiWare for Kevin about 4 or 5 years ago. I must still be on somebody's mailing list because I got an invite to the meeting and I thought I'd hop on and see if QualiWare was still recognizable to me. So I look forward with bated breath. Nice to see you all.
Great, thank you, Peter.
Welcome back, Peter.
Kevin's getting his pen sharpened right now going, can I get him to come back? That's great. Let me see, is there anybody else? Let me think here, lower hand, there's Kevin. Kevin, everybody knows Kevin. Okay, I do. I have somebody who wants to say hello. Syed Ajam?
Hi, Cecile, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, this is Sadi Ajam from the Vacancy Company. and we are here, me with my team, and we are very excited to join you in this meeting and maybe in future meetings as well, discussing things related to QualiWare.
Oh, that's great. Oh, it's really great to have you. Thank you so much for joining. We're very excited to have you. Carol let us know that you might have been planning to join in, so that's wonderful. I hope you enjoy the meeting. Feel free to ask questions.
Hey, Chris
Thanks,
Carter,
you.
why don't you introduce yourself too?
Hello. It's been a
Hello.
while. It's been a while since I've been on the calls. So I'm an independent consultant who used to work for KPMG for many years. Peter, you'll recall we worked together, I believe, on defense. Weren't you the instructor? I believe.
Yeah, that might have been me. Yep.
Anyways, so I would call myself an occasional business architect who does a lot of work in the federal space, but located in Toronto.
Excellent. Nice to see you, Chris. Haven't seen you for a while, so nice to have you back. All right. Anybody else before we move on? Just going to talk slowly in case there's any shy people out there and just waiting to pull the trigger. Okay. Okay, I'm going to transition over, JR, if you are good with getting yourself set up there. We have JR joining us from ESDC today. JR is going to talk to us about their release management process for QualiWare. And JR, I will hand things over to you.
Okay, I just got to get the share going. And the slideshow, which, there it is. So I went with a Halloween theme just a little here. So Peter, you had given me some training way long ago, and you're back to see if things have changed. And I'm going to say, the back end, the QLM side hasn't changed too much, but that thin client, what an improvement. I'm not going to get into that today. I gave a presentation last week to the GOC people, and I went into more the desktop, the web environment side. Reach out to me if you want a demo on the website, because it is way cool. Really, really liking it. But on the QualiWare side, gonna just kind of talk a little bit background of how we handle QualiWare in our department. So I kind of want to clarify some things. The case-maker work, we call that customization. It is what we would do if you want to add a new template, you want to maybe change some properties, you want to add a new field. That's what I would do in CaseMaker, and we would call that customization. Configuration is what I would say is how QualiWare is going to work, how it's going to function to do something. So governance or the HTML web templates to make the web work, you're using QLM to make it work with dialog layouts and query designs and stuff. So I would call that configuration. And then we have user content. And for us, we kind of split that into two. So if it's stuff that rarely changes, the business capabilities or value streams, they change maybe every 3-5 years kind of thing, depending on how things are going. But then you got project-y stuff that is ongoing. It's the difference between future as is and to be type stuff. So we split those into two different repositories. Reference, where's my mouse? Reference architecture is the as is, how things are, and then the transformation are the project-y stuff. So I sit in business architecture, report to BA, the business side of ESDC, but I work very closely with the QualiWare support team. And we kind of drew a line and said, you know what, customization configuration, that's going to be for us to handle, the support team to handle. But when it comes to user content, that's going to be for the different domains or the people that want to use it. And Cecile, I should have mentioned, I am not looking at the hands or anything. Maybe there probably aren't going to be any hands, but if there are, feel free, guys, just to yell at me and stop, and I'll take any questions as we go.
For sure, yeah, and please do,
Okay.
folks, if you have questions, you can either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll just jump in and interrupt JR as he goes
Yeah,
along.
please, because I'm not looking, so that'd be great.
I'll
Thank you,
keep
Cecile.
track. Thanks.
Thanks. So, lost the mouse. So something I just learned, and this is from Scott. So a big kudos to you, Scott, on this. And it goes back to when you first set up QualiWare. There's a repository setup. And according to documentation and the page 6, we should have the access log separate from the repository. I don't know how new that is, but when I took my training from Adam, years ago, he might have mentioned this and it went way over my head, but what we were doing before is either in repository data storage or in the access log, we would just hit generate the settings, because I don't know, I kind of blanked out our server name here, but I didn't know our server name. I didn't know our database. I would just say, you know what, generate the settings and go. And it would create its own schema based on what I was doing. And whether it was the access log or repository or social behavior warehouse or governance, I just hit generate. The problem with that is it would put in the default database name. That meant everything, my access log, my social behavior warehouse, went into this one database, and I didn't split them out. So things got, my little Halloween, things got a little slow. Like we got 130 gig size database right now. I had a chat with Scott about this, and standard wise, you've got the QEF, so it's the web side, that's that database. And then you got your repository stuff, your content, but then access log should stand out on its own. Governance and social behavior warehouse, according to the documentation I read, do belong in that same database. So Scott's suggestion is go into the QES on the web, go to the QES settings. There's your database name. So when I hit the generate, that is what's appearing. Change that and change it to something that is not an SQL legal name for a database. We end it in the exclamation marks. And when you do that, you get an error message. You cannot create this data store. And it's like, uh-oh, what did I do? And that's not just for me, but for everyone else on the team to say, oh, we should maybe change that, because it shouldn't be what should I put here? Well, it depends on what you're doing the build on. If you're doing a repository, then you put that database in. If it's an access log, you put this in. If it's social, you need to know what you're putting in. Don't go blindly generating settings. And we've been doing it wrong for years, and I'm slowly making that change now. So Scott, you get a little gold star at the top for me. So thank you for that.
JR, it's
helped.
been sort of a best practice for about the past 3 years.
So I don't know where I've been then, but I was always, and is Adam on the call? I don't think he is, so I'm just going to blame Adam. Adam said generate settings.
Yeah, well, probably when you took that
doing.
training, it was more than that long ago. So
It was.
This has changed sort of as we went from 10.6 to the 10.8,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
and
Well,
beyond environments.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, they were saying that one should be QualiWare _ data, and the other one should be QualiWare _ admin. So there would be basically two different databases instead of the one you have.
Just the one. And yeah, and it's gotten big, too big, where now I think my social behavior warehouse is timing out on certain things. And when I presented last week, I was leaning that way, and I still am leaning that way, where it's the one database is too big. So anyway, talk a little bit more on the meta model. So the meta model is casemaker work. So if I want to add a template or do something different, I have a prod production server. Casemaker files are on that server. I would open up CaseMaker. I'd make my changes in CaseMaker. I do that compile or that build, and it builds it to a folder called Dev Meta Model. I then open up my QLM, my dev configuration, and I would do my testing here. And this is the, in the meta model, if you ever want to know, this is where you're pointing. Our standard is EAM2, SYN and XSYN. But to use ours for this repository, you use dev meta model. But then in the same server, we have a UAT, so a user testing environment. And what I would do is I would do the build. Then I would use DevOps that Hashem wrote for us on our team. And there's a bunch of files and folders that get created in this dev meta model. I copy those using a pipeline that he set up, and it's just a script. And it copies them. It copies all of the files that were relevant to that meta model over to this folder. And then there's certain things in this folder that are unique that cannot be changed. And those just are stay as is. So on one server, I have, and then do the same thing for prod, do the copy over. Now I could go directly from here and bypass UAT or go through UAT. It really doesn't matter, depending on what's going on in our environment. But then we also have, so these cylinders represent different repositories. So again, 2 different repositories for that reference or that project-y type work, and then prod for our environment. We also do out of the box. So if I'm testing something like social behavior warehouse and I'm not sure what I'm really doing, if there's a chance I'm going to crash the server, meaning I am making changes to the scripts of the server C# and stuff, we stay, because there's been times it's like, oops, and you crash the whole server. So we do use the dev server for upgrades and for the testing of scripts, but that's more Hashem and his area. And again, we consider CaseMaker part of production. And if I want to copy those files, well, there's a pipeline for that Hashem wrote up for us. So this lets us, with 2 server licenses, really have 4 different environments. And it seems to have been working. We've been doing this for years. And so far, knock on wood, we haven't had any issues. So that's the customization side. Now, here's just, I opened up, just copied the Windows Explorer. So there's a QLM folder. I created data import folder, and I'll get into that later in the presentation, but then there's the models folder. That's your standard install. In there, CaseMaker would be in there, but there's your dev meta model, your prod meta model, and then all the files that are in there. So nothing there. So configuration stuff. This is the web settings, the HTML tiles, the desktops. Peter, I don't know if you've ever got into that, but that's the cool stuff. I'm really enjoying this side. So we only do that query design or the HTML work in one repository. Now, it does have issues that I'll go over, but once you kind of get through those little barriers, it seems to work because we're not creating all over the place. We only create in this dev configuration. So there is only one there's 5 HTML. So in this example, 5 different repositories. Each repository has its own HTML publisher. So if for some reason I copy the publisher from here over here, I'm not overwriting that publisher over here because they got different GUIDs. So what I would do is I would do my configuration, my example HTML template, and copy it over to the base, quick publish. depending on what we are bringing over, you might have to edit this publisher to bring in that tile or that desktop or the template definition. But then once it's here, you just refresh your copy. And the copying we always use the repo compare. That seems to be working really well, other than don't go over 3,500 templates. It seems to hang or cause issues. I'm not sure if I ever raised it as a bug. I just don't go over 3,500, which the publisher, if you were to copy, and that's how we knew, if I took the publisher from here and copied it over with everything that is related to it, I went over. And that's one of the reasons, that was one of the hiccups, that it's like, let's just not copy publisher anymore, because Sam wrote us a script that if we took publisher from here and copied it over, Sam's script would regenerate all the stuff that was unique to this repository. And it was working really well until things started to hang, and it had to do with the copying. So instead of trying to fix the the repo compare, it was just easier for us to change our process. So that means everyone has their own publisher. So you do your testing in UAT, and then talk to the users, have them do their testing, and then yes, let's get it all over to prod. One of the things that, if you think of a tile points to content. And we got to be really careful with that. So in our dev environment, or tile and template definition possibly could point to content. You cannot have that content here, and I'll explain that in the next slide. So big bad, do not copy from, because UAT is going to have content in it, and we got to be careful that we're not copying content from UAT to prod, because we don't want to overwrite content that is maybe a newer version. So again, Halloween theme, you're in trouble if you copy content over. And then talking about stubs, and I'll get into that in the back, because there's times that we would want to do that copy back, and I'll explain that on the next slide. So if we think content wise in prod, I've created a diagram, and I want to create an HTML tile for it. Normally what I was doing before is I take that content and I bring it over to dev. I'd create my tile, and then I'd link it to my diagram. then the client, they go and then change their diagram, but I don't have that change here. And then when I go to copy my tile over, I'm also copying the link to the diagram, which then gives me grief, and I kill their diagram. And I didn't realize that when we were first developing how we were going to set this up. And that really has caused me some issues. It's like, how are we going to get around this? So scenario that we're doing now, content is developed in prod. I'm going to develop my tile here, because it's so important that this expands. I can go bigger to more than just 4 repositories. I can go 5, 10, 100 repositories. And the idea is to keep this fairly simple, where our development is only done in one place. So my tile is created in dev. I'm going to copy the tile over. I'm not going to link it to anything. So the tile in dev just won't work. I'll link it to the diagram in prod, but then I'll copy the tile back here. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to create a stub in this environment. And that was the only way that I could figure out how to create a stub. And all it is it's the GUID of the object, and that's it. There's no object that exists in dev. So then if content changes here and I recopy the template, maybe on the next release of my dev, I am not going to overwrite. It just is going to automatically link and say, hey, you're now pointing to version 2, because it's the same GUID. A bit of a pain we do have a procedure that we're somewhat following. And the idea is when you is in the repo compare, that when you go to do it, you're taking this stuff off. So that's that backwards copy here to create that stub is done just by doing when you do a repo compare, these are your options that you're getting. I take them off. Overall, that seems to work for us. My tiles in dev won't work, but because we're in dev, it's like you should be able to find your own diagram or put the link in and then just don't copy it over, like make sure that link comes out of this environment. So it's originally, it's been learning for the last couple months on how to do, I want to go back one more slide, how to handle this configuration without overwriting content in the user's environment. Sorry. User content. So this is where we've got users that are building, they're going to do it only in the prod environment. At times, we might want to get that into the UAT environment. I'm pointing to base here, but it could be my workspace as well. There is still some debate on whether we should be using my workspaces or not. People aren't liking the idea of promotion. So you lose out on the revisions and people don't revision in the base, but nothing has been decided yet. So this red line is the copying of those stubs only. No content is to be here because you don't want to overwrite it when you copy it back. Just some naming standards that we got into and purposes of the environments, which I kind of went through already. One of the things that, and okay, so I'm going to switch topics just a little. We import content on a nightly basis in production. And I'm using an event tracker. QSA is the user. It's the QCL engine that's doing it and the HTML publisher. I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but if you want to know how I was doing it, feel free to reach out. I am not putting the event tracker in my CaseMaker startup files because those files are used in multiple repositories. So you don't know where you want them. So I put them in the QualiWare setup when QualiWare first launches. I'm using the GTI. The GTI does create the QCL script. So if there's changes, it's fairly easy to do. Just go into GTI, regenerate it. My CSV file is in that common share that all QualiWare has access to. So, you know, I've got PeopleSoft or my project data is not managed in QualiWare, but I get a CSV file from them at 2 a.m. So that CSV file is brought in through that QCL engine. Everything is logged. There is a manual log template, and that's what I'm using to document everything. The scripts all do it for me. So it just looks at anything older than 30 days, delete, and it just is on that loop window kind of thing. I had to do a lot of testing on where the engine should exist. Whether the engine should just exist in the base, does it exist only in the workspace? Maybe it needs to be in both. Where does the QualiWare setup need to exist? Is it only exist in the base, which then is inherited in the workspace? Is it only in the workspace? What I found after all of the testing is it has to be in both. The engine is created in both the base and the workspace. The QualiWare setup is done in the base for the base files and then in the workspace for the workspace files. And there's an if statement that I'm using is if you're in the base, then run the script. If you're in the workspace, ignore it. And that's really the summary of that. We got into importing Active Directory. That's about 40,000 records that's coming in every other night. Other than the size of the database, which is why I got onto the size part in the previous part, I haven't really noticed a performance issue. So this is a lot of people that are being imported, because I got people that are in governance workflows that need to be referenced. And how do you reference someone? How do you send them an email if they're not in Active Directory? And I tried to get a list, and it's like, well, we don't know. We pick the people that are needed at that time for whatever project that is being worked on. I just went, that's fine. It just makes it easy. Let's just import Active Directory. So then my my data content is imported at 2:15. So social behavior warehouse sync is done daily. Repo sync should be done daily, I think. According to the documentation, they were fine with weekly, but I think it's going to flip it to daily as well. So I'm finding a schedule is somewhat helpful. That's it. Cecile, did I go over? I'm sorry if I did.
No, you're really good. I was just taking myself off mute to go time check. And there
right.
you were. That's
right.
good. Excellent. Thanks, JR.
So probably way too much detail, and I'm sorry, but it went technical where last week we kind of talked about this stuff. Peter, I think of you, and you should have seen this because it's really cool on the stuff we're doing. So, but anyway.
Maybe we'll have you back for another time. You never
yeah, well,
know.
I just presented to the other group, right? So I didn't want to repeat.
Yeah, I know.
So,
there's also other people on here too, so we're better. We're more fun.
Yes, of course you are. Of course.
We're more fun.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That's really. Does anybody have questions for JR? Let's just leave that there for a moment and let people think about it. If anybody has questions.
So some of the new users to QualiWare, or people that are considering QualiWare, will look at it and say, what's this case maker thing? And what happens is, over time, typically what we find when a new department comes in, they'll maybe have us do their customization work for them. We'll train their staff over time. Some departments have us continue to do that, and some departments train their own people. For example, JR and people within ESDC, or shared services, or CBSA, or D&D, who are longtime users. So,
CRA.
So, really, it's a maturity level thing, in terms of, and also departmentally, how many resources do you have? Focus on the business and the interface side of things, or do you focus on the detailed technical things? And so we can help you with determining that as you come on board.
Thank you.
So don't be afraid.
Yeah, that might have been a little too technical if you had some new people on here, so I do apologize. But
no, that's okay. That's all right. It's also, there's lots of place for both, so that's great. Any questions for JR before we let him go?
So JR, this is your live environment?
This is live. So you thought, well, while you're talking, I'll just kind of click on some things just so Peter gets to see the pretty stuff, because this dashboard stuff is way cool to be able to click and see how things change, kind of thing. And yeah, I've got a variety of different dashboards and stuff. So
great.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it. All right, going once, going twice for questions. Okay. Great. Next up on our agenda is Dragos. Dragos is one of our business analysts in the customer success team at CloseReach, and is going to talk to us a little bit about the spreadsheets. So Dragos.
Thank you, Cecile. Yes, I'm going to be expanding a little bit on what I last presented on spreadsheets. I don't know if you guys can remember back to the April 2022 QUG. We took a deep dive into spreadsheets, and together we looked at spreadsheets powered by generic queries. We updated repository objects from spreadsheet dynamic content. We made static content with formulas. We saw spreadsheets in action inside template definition tabs and how those are set up. And we also imported content directly into QualiWare spreadsheets with CSV files. So there was a lot of good stuff in there. And I recommend checking it out on your YouTube page if you didn't attend. What I want to chat about today was only briefly touched on during that meeting. So it's not necessarily new. I think we were running 10.5 at the time, but it is something that I think is overlooked, at least on our side a little bit. So that is the ability to perform governance actions inside spreadsheets. Recently, one of my colleagues, Devlin, reminded us that this even exists. And I felt it was good to bring up again for those of you who are involved in governing large lists of objects. And I'll even show you how to make your own spreadsheets a little later with the fields that you might be interested in. So I'm just gonna share my screen now. So one of the strengths of QualiWare is that it provides you with options. There are often many ways to do one thing. For instance, if I wanted to perform a governance action on an object, I could do so by directly visiting the objects page on the web, which is what we're looking at right now. So I have here a bunch of what are referred to as governance actions, even though they don't necessarily change the status. There's obviously the button to move it to the next governance state. And of course here, this is just in our development environment, one of our development environments for the governance lifecycle for a corrective action. So we can see it's at the first stage, and that button allows us to move it to the second stage. So that's one way we could do it. Another way we could approach it is perhaps by looking at it through a QRV. So it's a list of corrective actions and a few fields related to them in this case. And of course, you could go down one by one through the QRV. Let's say you were someone who had to govern all of these objects, and that's your assignment. You have to move all of these to the next state, vet them and so forth. So you could do that by looking at a QRV. You could click on the object and move it along its governance lifecycle and read all the information about it. Another way is through the repository explorer. So if you're actually in a list of objects, you can actually click on the 3-dot-sushi menu here and go to governance, and you have your governance actions here that you can take. You can move it to ready for approval or circulate it or into a finished state. Another way is if you have for certain templates like business process networks and diagrams, things are part of the change management. They will governance workflow. They will appear in my tasks, or you could do it in QLM. So I've right-clicked an object, business process network, and clicked on the governance button. And this is the dialog that I have. And of course, I can move it to the next governance state from here. And last but not least, in our case, and what I want to talk a little bit about today, guys, is in a spreadsheet. So here's a spreadsheet, and it shows corrective actions and various fields relating to the corrective action template. The spreadsheet itself makes use of a generic query to display information. It's not laid out in any particular way. It's just an example from one of our development environments with some dummy information. You can see here that I have a variety of attributes on display, including the status one, which, by the way, best practice, if you're creating a spreadsheet and you're using generic queries, you're creating your generic query, don't use the status attribute. Make sure you use the audit GS, because this status attribute is tied to the attribute that existed before we actually had any governance in place. So, I mean, there is data validation on these cells, but even if I change them, it won't really do much in terms of governance. You still have to take this through the built-in governance process, which you have access to on a spreadsheet. And So in the April 2022 QUG, I went briefly across, I showed you guys this button bar in the sort of Excel like interface in spreadsheets. And the very last button is the governance actions button. So I can govern any of these objects by simply clicking on the object in the name. So the objects cell in the name column, and then just clicking on this governance actions button. And you can see we not only have the governance state change buttons themselves, but we're also able to edit and create comments and corrective actions and subscribe to it, like we would be able to do from visiting the page of the object. And of course, view where it sits along the governance lifecycle. So you might say, okay, well, that's not too different from, QRV. Oops, there's a QRV. Yeah, so it's not too different from a QRV. This is an example of one. With the exception, you might have a few less clicks here and there inside the spreadsheet. And you'd be right, except what if, say, you had to govern 20 or 30 or 40 or more objects in a short amount of time, and perhaps you're looking for only key pieces of information and only certain attribute fields, and you just really want to be able to action everything from one page, from one place, instead of sifting through web pages and dialog layouts and object properties, trying to find what you're looking for and update and move it along the governance process. So things like changing the actors and participants, like I have here responsible, I could just highlight it and click Edit Cell, and I'm right here in the select dialog, and I can change the responsible from here. Multi-link fields work as well. So here we have multiple objects linked to it. Really any kind of field that you can update that is both a dynamic field and not something that's bound to automatic assignment, like the governance workflow and certain other attributes that populate automatically. So in other words, these spreadsheets versus QRVs and other options allow you to glance at the relevant information, quickly modify it where needed, and ultimately govern everything in one spot. And that's the promise of what I'm showing you. And for some of you, it might make a lot of sense to use this. For others, it might not. It's clunkier than a QRV if you want to view diagram content. I mean, you can certainly do it. Like, let's say that any of these objects were a diagram, I would just click on the follow link button, and I could actually open the link to the objects page. So it's not that, it's not that big of a deal. You might find, QRVs to be better in this case. But for more textual-based templates like ideas or nonconformances or corrective actions or audit programs or anything that's more text-based and less visual. Yeah.
We have a quick question. Do you still need to govern each object individually, or can you govern many at once? From Bob, or from Dee, sorry.
You do need to, I mean, I was actually playing around with this the other day. So if I highlight, let's say, these objects and I click on the edit, it actually lets me select which one I want to action on to open that edit dialog. But I found once it comes to governance actions, you actually can't do that. And I would say largely this is by design. There are governance processes in place for a reason. People are expected to follow procedure of, properly vetting an object. And as convenient as, for instance, spreadsheets would make that process, doing a mass governance changes is probably against what the whole governance system is in place for. So you can't, to answer your question, you can't do multiple governance state changes in bulk. But like I said, for textual-based templates, it's really good. But like anything, it really depends on your individual use case and comfort level with this more kind of technical view, and obviously personal preference. So now I understand a lot of you haven't even touched spreadsheets in QualiWare, and it could be a little bit daunting getting started configuring this. So I wanted to demystify the process a little bit and show you just how quickly you can set up a new spreadsheet for governing. So I'm going to do this live. I'm going to come out with something like this in the end. So I'm going to go into QLM. The first thing we're going to do is make our generic query. And for that, often I find the easiest way is to just use a query design.
1 second.
Hey, Dragos.
Yep.
Kevin actually had a question as well, just before you move on. He wanted to know, did you test this for the 2 objects that are the same governance states?
Did I test this for 2 objects that are in the same governance state? You mean like doing them simultaneously?
Yeah.
No.
What you selected before had objects in a variety of governance states. I'm wondering if you picked row 19 and 20, which are in the same state.
Sure. Well, let's see what.
Like if you selected 2 rows that are in the same state, 15 and 36, for example, at the same time.
Okay, so these 2 I can send to, these 2 are in the same state.
Yeah.
They're both in CA assigned, so I can try.
No, there you go. Doesn't let you. Okay, just wondered. Thanks.
No worries. Anyone else have questions before I move on to the QLM side of things?
No, there's nothing else there right now, Dragos.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Actually,
Oh, sure.
actually, I do have a quick question. In 10.8, they've introduced the HTML 3 view or 3 list, which you can associate with a governance transition, which allow you to govern multiple objects at the same time. Let's say you have a workflow diagram with 10 activity and you want to create a new revision of that 10 activity along with the diagram. Then on your create new revision transition, you add that object. And then when you create new revision, then you can select which object you want new revision to be created, including the diagram. Or you can even not select the diagram and select all the object on the diagram. And I believe that if you have other governed, let's say you take a container type object like an architecture domain that is in the development state with diagrams that are also in the development state, and you want to transition your architecture domain, I believe if you have the governance role in each of those diagram, you can move them all at once through the governance if they are all at the same step. That still needs to be tested, but I think it does.
Well, that's great material for us. Thank you for sharing. We'll get on that right away. Because that is exciting. That is cool. To not only be able to update the governance state of the child objects in the diagram, but you're saying if other diagrams are like linked to a parent, then everything would move along if they're at the same stage together.
Yeah, again, this still needs to be tested, but I think I've seen it. But again,
we'll test that out and come back to the group next meeting. Thanks, Phil.
Okay.
All right. So first thing we got to do to make our spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is based off a query design. So we got to make a query design, or sorry, it's based off a generic query. So we got to make a query design which turns into a generic query. So first thing I'm going to do is make that query design. We'll just make a new one here. We will call it 1.2 demo tests. I'm just going to open it up, and now I have the query design wizard, which where I select the design type, usually from repository, and then we get to choose our template. And I've made a bunch of these with corrective actions before, so it just suggests it in the list there for me. So I'm just going to click OK. And we have the beginnings of our query design. And the next thing to do is to populate it with properties that we might be interested in. So the way you do that is you left click in here, not right click, left click. You select your properties. We definitely want audit governance state. Name is in there already. And governance state, like I mentioned before, make sure you use audit GS as the attribute. Do not use the status attribute if it's in here. I'm pretty sure it is somewhere. I order these alphabetically. Yeah, there is a status attribute. So don't use that. And also make sure to select these attributes with by holding down control. So I'm gonna go for, let's see, we want maybe related non-conformance. We want corrective action taken. These are all relevant fields to corrective actions. Maybe we'll add a few more. Has responsible. We want a description and a short description. I'll give it a second to populate here. Almost there. There we go. So now we have our selection of attributes and we can generate a generic query. This is what's going to go inside our spreadsheet. I'm just going to double click this black YouTube button. It's going to make that generic query for me. There's nothing we need to do with the generic query for now other than note the name. So now that we have our generic query, we're just going to make a spreadsheet. New spreadsheet. Column point 2 demo test as well. Open up that spreadsheet, and as you can notice, the spreadsheet is empty to begin with. There's absolutely nothing populated. And what's going to actually fill most of these fields in is if I go to the settings tab in the spreadsheet and in the external data source attribute field, I link a generic query to it. So I'm going to link my 1.2 demo test object to it. And this is the important part. Make sure you press build. It's going to update everything with the rules and filters, column filters for your spreadsheet to render on the web. So after I've built the spreadsheet from the generic query, I just press apply. OK, and publish the spreadsheet, and we're off to the races. So now that my spreadsheet's published, I can simply go view it on the web. And sometimes it takes a little while for spreadsheets to render, but this one came out basically instantly. So you can see here that our governance state looks a little bit different than the status in this, in that you cannot actually update this field, although it is part of the dynamic area in the spreadsheet. This is something that is assigned by way of governance actions. But yes, essentially you would have everything that you need here to then begin doing governance actions on these objects. So for instance, select my object, and I can move it to the next governance state. And if you notice, it's also updated it from CA assigned to respond with corrective action plan. So these are dynamic cells and they do update, although worthy of note, if you actually update any of these other fields related to the object, they'll be bolded and italicized, and you have to save to commit those changes. So that's all I had to show you guys today. To summarize, spreadsheets can be an efficient way to govern large lists of objects when you need to glance at specific and relevant information, modify it where needed, and ultimately govern all items in one spot. So yeah. So anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Dragos. Anybody have any questions? I noticed that JR put a note in for Denise with some information on something that they had done as well about importing hundreds of templates. So Denise, if you wanted to have a look at that. Kevin Wilson, you have a question. Is there a way to configure a spreadsheet with sorting and filtering as the default?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that right now, but I can definitely look into it for you. Sorting and filtering by default.
Anybody else on the call might know the answer to that question?
I would be looking to your generic query and adding it to I want to say it's add-ons in the generic query. I'll put it in.
If you open your query design,
yeah.
If you open open that the property of that diagram.
Yep.
On the query filter. If you put an object in the concern, so it just pick one template per se, one diagram or whatever, and then when you click on the wizard, then you can set the where clause, the filter, the order by stuff. So if you click wizard, and everything you set up in the query design would translate to the generic query. So here, if you right click on the name column, let's say, yeah, you can do filter editor, and then you can filter on the name, and then then you click OK. You will see it will write the SQL query.
Yeah, wonderful.
Nice.
And then again, in your generic query, you can also add sort by.
There you go.
Yeah. So this is a where clause, but then if you click OK and generate your query.
Okay, generate a query.
Now under the advanced query, you will see the where clause where it's being applied. So the last line. And then from there, you can also add that sort by whatever.
So don't add the sort here, because then if you do a rebuild, you'll lose it.
True, but you can
put it in your extra SQL command. That's where you can put it.
Yeah.
Under
So
query filter.
Query filter. Yeah, query filter.
Under query filter.
Yeah. Here, you got additional SQL command. No. Cancel that. And the other box below the say sort by whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if you want a specific the JS, then you can specify which one you want, and then.
Right. Wonderful.
And within your query design, that's also where you should be naming your column instead of having the so if you click on each of those attributes, or each of those properties, you see the header governance state. You can name it something else. Because sometimes you have queries that might have multiple object, and then you have name, T1 name, T2 name, T3 name. So which one is which? So that's where you would change the header. So one could be the policy state, and then the activity state, then they would all point to the governance state or the JS, but with a different name in the column.
Thank you. Kevin, does that answer your question?
I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so my question was related to, you've got some data that you're reviewing with your spreadsheet, but you want to zero in on a particular set of those rows. But on the next day, you might want to look at something different. So the idea is that you would do the filtering and sorting within the spreadsheet. So I guess my question is for Phil, is that what you just showed, does that give you that capability in the spreadsheet, or are you just filtering before it gets to the spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's before the spreadsheet. You want to do it in the spreadsheet. I think there's some dynamic commands there to help you.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess in that respect, and then my question is still outstanding.
So
we'll look into that.
But if
we'll
you go back
out.
to the spreadsheet there,
The
Dragos?
spreadsheet is
Do you want me to republish
the
it?
Excel type.
No. Well.
And you don't need to publish the spreadsheet, by the way. It's just an
Yeah.
object. It's not a diagram.
So right now it's filtered by myself. So if I save that, and then
But
I
there's
refresh the spreadsheet.
sortation capability there at the top, isn't there? I believe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it persists though. That's my question. Really.
Right. It doesn't save the view. I guess that was your question, right?
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, I actually played with view options to save it, but unfortunately, it doesn't. You'll have to go back and click on the filter, menu once again next day.
And now it's
So you're either embedded in the query itself, or you've got to refilter it the next time you go into the the general spreadsheet. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Thank
Good
you.
good topic, guys.
Any other? Thanks for the question, Kevin. Any other questions for Dragos before we let him off the hook? Actually, I will take this opportunity to put a plug in for our next month's meeting. And if there are other topics that you would like us to cover about QualiWare, to feel free to let me know, and we will certainly add them onto the agenda. So topics like this, particular functionality in QualiWare that you're interested in learning more about, please feel free to let us know. Okay, so now next up is my colleague Andrew. I bumped Andrew from the user group meeting in May, and then I promised him I wouldn't bump him again. I promised you I wouldn't bump you again. So Andrew is going to talk to us about Archimate and QualiWare and some work he's been doing and some things that he's discovered over the last little while that he'd like to share with us. So Andrew, if you would like to take it from here.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Cecile. Oops. Yeah, hi everyone. It's a bit ironic that I'm billed as the tech corner because my talk will be the least technical of what we've heard. I'll be the least technical of the three of the previous two speakers who went kind of deep into a couple of slices of stuff. I'm going to talk a more kind of a shallow horizontal piece about where our efforts and our work and our discovery with Archimate and not least Archimate in tandem and within the QualiWare platform. So yeah, I'm Andrew. I've probably chatted to most of you in the 18 months since I've been with CloseReach. I was previously with Canada Post, where amongst other things, I used Archimate on the business design platform, and also attained the Open Group Archimate practitioner certification, which was a nice thing to be able to do. I hope my voice lasts. I had COVID last week, and I'm still not quite there on my trajectory, my recovery trajectory. So I think my voice will stand out though. As Cecile said, this I originally was going to go with this in the May user group, but that's fine. It still stands. It's still applicable, and now we're in end of October. Yeah. So Archimate CloseReach findings so far. It's kind of a vague. Intentionally, there's been several aspects to what we've been doing. In the spring, I took some time away from client work to deliver a lunch and learn for my internal colleagues in CloseReach, just about what Archimate was and how it can add value from the standpoint of most of them. From a QualiWare perspective, would have been used to working with the QualiWare notation, the native QualiWare notation, rather than the Archimate notation on the platform. So for many of them, and possibly for many of you, although I know I am caveating it, I know a lot of what I'm going to talk to. Some of you will be experts on what I'm going to talk to, but just bear with me, because I think it's useful to kind of take stock, and maybe for the people on the call who are not as advanced in their architecture journey. But anyway, the two artifacts that I'd worked on were an internal lunch and learn on what Archimate was all about and how it can add value. And also one of our customers requested what they referred to as a hybrid guidance document, and hybrid meaning they wanted a platform agnostic view of what Archimate was, but also a platform, whatever the opposite of agnostic is. So from a QualiWare perspective, how do you utilize Archimate on the QualiWare platform? So I'm just going to I'm hoping for 10 minutes, it might be more like 15, going over some of this material in this, kind of dipping into some of this material. What I won't be doing, unlike my two predecessors, is actually going into the QualiWare tool set to demonstrate stuff, but I'm going to kind of skim over stuff and see if it whets people's appetites for the kind of consultancy and knowledge that we can offer from CloseReach. 3 areas: viewpoints and views, why they're important. So why do we even do this modeling stuff? Why do we do this? Why do we go to the trouble of creating diagrams and views which are based on viewpoint definitions? What is Archimate? Why use it? A quick look at the core framework. And not last, but very much not least, some considerations even to bear in mind when you're using Archimate on the QualiWare platform. All right. So what is this? This is the ISO 42010 meta model. Oops. So why am I talking about? Okay, brain and gear. Let's go back a bit. Oops. Let's try that again. 5. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. So ISO 42010 is a widely followed standard which addresses the creation, analysis, and sustainment of architectures of systems through the use of architecture descriptions. Why am I bothering to bore you with this? It's because you can't move very far in the Archimate world, and indeed in the TOGAF world, before you encounter this ISO 42010 meta model, and specifically the bits which I've highlighted in this kind of yellow. It's meant to be yellow. It's looking a bit kind of pale yellow. But the concepts which I've highlighted here: stakeholder concern, architecture viewpoint, architecture view. Many of you will know what this is all about, but this is why we do, and this applies equally to the QualiWare notation as it is to the Archimate notation. But this is why we do this stuff before I launch into some Archimate stuff. So stakeholders have concerns whenever something's going to be changed of any architectural significance. Multiple stakeholders have concerns. Is my stuff going to break? Is my stuff going to cost too much? Am I going to be out of a job? Those concerns can be framed in architecture viewpoints, which is a definition of a diagram which can be shown to the stakeholder to allow them to be happier with the architecture change, allow them to check that their stuff is not going to break, that they're not going to be out of a job, etc. The viewpoint is the definition which governs the actual view. So the view is the actual instance of a viewpoint. The view is the actual diagram which a stakeholder can consume and allows him to be okay or not. He's allowed to say no. He's allowed to say he's not happy. That's what architecture is about. And then you negotiate with the stakeholder to gain his onboardness, his happiness, whatever. And I think I've covered all of this. So stakeholder consumes, that's the one thing which is missing from the stakeholder somehow gets, it's all wrapped up in an architecture description, which is an aggregation of views which the stakeholder consumes, multiple stakeholders consume to ensure that they're happy with the proposed change. All well and good. And last but not least, and this is useful because consistency, when you're defining viewpoints and creating views which are governed by those viewpoints, then consistency and standardization is needed so that the architect creating the view knows what to create in order that the stakeholder consuming the view knows how to interpret what the architect has created, and that's crucial. Otherwise, no one knows what on earth the other person is doing. All right. So Archimate, what is it? It's an EA modeling language, which means it can be used to describe architectures across multiple domains. For example, business, information, application, technology, etc. The standard, which is owned by the Open Group. The Open Group is a global consortium focusing on standards. And they're one of their key things, which is good for most people, is that their standards are by design, they're vendor and platform agnostic. So you can do Archimate without needing to land on a platform. But obviously it's useful if you have a platform which supports your Archimate work, and we'll get to that in a second from a QualiWare perspective. The Archimate language has been designed to be as small as possible in inverted commas, but what that actually means is it's designed to be general and not to be specific, if that makes sense. So if you're looking specifically to model class diagrams and all the things which might be of interest to software engineers, you might gravitate towards UML. And similarly, if you're looking in modeling processes and process architecture, you're likely to gravitate towards business process modeling notation. Archimate, so those two notations try to accommodate all possible needs within that relatively narrow domain. But for simplicity and ease of use, Archimate has limits itself to, it's this kind of, I guess, Pareto 80%, 20% type thing. 80% of use, is that right? I'm not going to be able to. Anyway, yeah. So Archimate is designed to be able to gracefully handle 80% of practical use cases, and provided you don't want to descend into the specificity which is going to need the capabilities of a UML or a BPMN, for example. And obviously, tools such as QualiWare can be used to build and query Archimate models in order to, crucially, why do we do this? To answer business questions. So that's what well, I've already touched on why you would use Archimate, but specifically from a government perspective, my understanding is, this is all a bit before my time, but Treasury Board has recommended but not mandated that Archimate be the notation for depicting architecture descriptions within Government of Canada. I'm told there was a decision 5 years ago at the GCAOP Community of Practice to use Archimate as the common language between departments, common modeling language, or the architecture description language between departments. And it was urged that departments without an existing architecture language adopt Archimate. And those who already had one, to document a mapping of that, of what they had adopted to Archimate. It is very consistent, as I'll show some of that in the next slide. It's relatively easy to understand. It's designed to be understandable by both business and technical consumers, which just makes it very useful. And I've just, yeah, it allows multiple technical and non-technical stakeholders and roles to use it. And it is becoming gradually more and more an industry standard. And this is the core Archimate framework. This will be familiar to many of you, but for those who might not be super familiar with it, you'll see there are 3 rows. There's a yellow row, and there's a blue row, and there's a green row. Those are called layers in Archimate's parlance. So we've got a business layer, we've got an application layer, a technology layer. This is only the core framework. There are other there's a motivational there's a strategic layer. There's a motivational. I hesitate to call it a layer because it's a vertical. It's a cross-cutting. There's a physical layer. I'm choosing to not depict those here for simplicity. What we're seeing on the screen is a large part of what you will use. Certainly if you're involved in solution architecture, if you're involved in strategy. I'm not depicting the strategy layer here, but and the kind of technology supports application and supports business. You'll see there are patterns which repeat. So interface, for example, there's a technology interface, there's an application interface, there's a business interface. Similarly for service, process, function, and event, the pattern kind of repeats through all the different layers. There's a technology service, an application service, a business service. I'm not going to go into exactly what these things mean, but just it might whet your appetite to investigate what these things do. It allows for encapsulation. So, for example, you can have a business service serving the application layer, and from a business perspective, all you need to see is it's quite possible all you need to see is an application service. You may have no interest from a business perspective of how that application service is implemented. Excuse me a second. And the final thing to say on this diagram is that it's quite a syntactically strong language, but the sentences all go from right to left. So you'll see these as columns which are called aspects. So active structure, behavior, and passive structure. So I said sentences there. So active structure exhibits a behavior on a passive and an element in the passive structure. So an example of that would be business actor performs a business function on a business object. It always goes from right to left. Something acts on a passive structure and it exhibits it executes a behavior on that element in the passive aspect, if that makes sense. So last slide, specifically from the QualiWare perspective, Archimate obviously is available in QualiWare. Architects now have a choice between utilizing one or both of the QualiWare notation and the Archimate notation. You needn't limit yourself to either or. There are some considerations if you want to mix the two, but then actually there are some strengths if you want to mix the two. QualiWare are gradually that's a fair statement. QualiWare are gradually enhancing the functionality available when using the Archimate templates, and I'm told they're aiming for compliance with Archimate 3.2. We find that QualiWare haven't been so good at kind of broadcasting a roadmap for compliance, and they seem to enhance the Archimate side kind of quite regularly, but also if you're waiting for something on the Archimate side, they maybe won't kind of broadcast, well, it's going to be available on this quarter or in this month, whatever. So in terms of the comparison between what you can do if you model solely in the QualiWare notation compared to if you model solely in the Archimate notation. What I've said sometimes in kind of unguarded moments is that Archimate has in the past been a bit of a second-class citizen on the QualiWare toolset, and I know that some customers have obviously they've delved into the meta model, and they've enhanced the Archimate out of the box capability to make it more functional and make it more useful. But as it stands, if you were to utilize Archimate out of the box just now, you're going to find that some of the things which you're used to were working instantaneously and without any extra interaction on the QualiWare side just don't work on the Archimate side. For example, the Actions tab, heat maps. If you populate all of the attributes on an Archimate application component that you would expect to participate and show you value in a heat map on the QualiWare side, the heat map on the Archimate side, it just doesn't do anything. And there's a few examples of those actions just not doing anything, which is interesting. But what has gone a long way to kind of solving that is the introduction of dashboards, because the attributes which you would want to work on the out of the box actions, but which don't, many of them now do work with. They can be made to work with dashboards, which is good. Again, I'm not going to show you an example, but dashboards can be included in many, certainly probably all of the Archimate templates, because an out of the box dashboard, you can probably extend it so that it can be used with any of the Archimate diagram templates, although I haven't experimented too much with that. So the dashboards have gone a long way to making Archimate more of a first-class citizen on the QualiWare platform. The other thing which has been gradually being introduced and is now in a not bad place is the I've called them the native relationships between QualiWare objects, and what I mean by that is the things like we're used to using a breaks down to within the object attributes, or a capability, meaning like this object realizes this capability. Now, way more so than in the past, you can go direct Archimate to Archimate, whereas in the past, a breaks down to might have been available from within an Archimate object, but you could only break down to a QualiWare object, which was kind of, it limited the usefulness of that if your intention was to stay modeling solely within the Archimate ecosystem, if you like. So that's good. Again, I don't have a measure of how far QualiWare have gone with that, but they're continually improving. Finally, one thing Kevin asked me to mention, several of us in QualiWare attended Roger Burrowton's excellent business architecture course about a couple of months ago, and we're in the process of mapping. So in Roger's course material, he has multiple concepts, and we are in the process of mapping those concepts to their to the templates which can be used to model them, both on the Archimate side and on the QualiWare side. And we're kind of done with that, and but actually no, we're not. It's still a work in progress, but we are. I guess we're going to publish something around that in the not too distant future, so that those of you who want to kind of marry the Roger Burrowton business architecture world with the QualiWare world, we're working on something to facilitate that. And that's it. I'm going to stop. My slideshow's finished. I'll pause for any questions.
Thanks, Andrew. Just a note on that last comment for the business architecture course. We're preparing that spreadsheet, and we'll put it into a PDF format and get it out to and make it available a couple of different ways to people. But Roger is going to come back in February, by the way, and we will be running another business architecture in-person course here in our office. So if you're looking for that, If you've got some training dollars before the end of fiscal, might be the way you want to dispose of that of those training dollars. And all of Roger's concepts, apparently, he's in discussions. I was talking with him today. They're going to do a more complete, QualiWare's working on a more complete set of templates and models in the standard QualiWare tool set to encompass everything that he covers in his business architecture course. IGOs and things like that are already there, but they're in talking with Roger today. He and Kuno are working through a new meta model to encompass all of those concepts. So good news there.
Do we have any other questions do we have any questions for Andrew on the presentation that he provided us with on Archimate? Give everybody a moment to think about it. Hey, thank you very much, Andrew. Your voice held up quite well, so thanks very much. Next up on our agenda, and we should be wrapping up in about 10 minutes or so, is last but not least is the birthday boy. It was Kevin's birthday on Sunday. Everybody say happy birthday, Kevin. Today's birthday Boxing Day for Kevin. So Kevin's going to give us update on some CloseReach news. Over to you.
So anybody who doesn't get the newsletter from QualiWare, there's an AI in Enterprise Architecture webinar happening on November 16th. So we can, if you reach out to us, we can send you the link, or we will, or you can go to the QualiWare website and I think find that link there as well.
It's on the website. Yeah, it is as well.
We're also hosting an Edgy webinar November 21st. So for those that don't know what Edgy is, it's an organizational design meta model that is used by business planners and organizational experts to help them design the next iteration of a particular organization. So that'll be November 21st, and there will be additional details on our website for that. The business architecture framework, that was the thing that I was talking about. Roger's QualiWare adding all of the meta model components for what Roger's company is called PRG for their business architecture framework. So that'll become part of the standard QualiWare tool set as well. Some specific QualiWare updates. We don't have an update on the automated license management system. It was due out the beginning of November, so we have not heard anything as yet on that. We'll let you know as soon as we do. Cecile has a meeting with them on Wednesday, so more to follow. And we don't have word on the 10.9 releases yet. All of the Salsa replacements, if you recall last time I mentioned that the software licensing supply arrangement that we had used for the last few years was expiring, and there was a new vehicle being put in place, a new Salsa. We have been awarded all of those replacement supply arrangements. So you're coming to CloseReach or QualiWare. Software components that aren't on the GCEA solution contract. We have the Salsa in place for that. We also hold the Salsa for collaborative business planning. So that's the at QualiWare add-on for financial and resource modeling and utilization. We also have a new Salsa for a company called Aribatech, which used to be known as Qualisoft. Aribatech purchased the Norwegian QualiWare partner, and we have their archive tool as well as their version of the mobile app for QualiWare available on the Salsa. And CloseReach also has our own software add-ons for compliance management and business improvement. So a number of different methods of acquiring software, related to QualiWare. And I want to thank Tamara for all of her hard work, getting all of that through PSPC, which if anybody's dealt with them for contracting, it's not the easiest. So we had a lot of
she gets the Perseverance Award.
Yes. Well, when you submit and it's like the next day, oh no, we're transferring that to someone else. And a week later, oh no, we're transferring to starting over again every time. Anyhow, we have a course coming up December 11th to 13th, Business Process Analysis and Costing Workshop. And that's the non-technical methodology driven training. Mike, I don't know if you're on.
Mike is on.
If
Mike's
you want to unmute for a minute, and I'll give you 30 seconds for a plug.
30 seconds.
Oh, go.
Go.
Yeah, no, well, you described it fine. I think many people on the call have seen CBP, which is the embodiment of BPAC, but BPAC, Business Process Analysis Costing, is an 8-step methodology to design, identify and collect that data, validate your models, and then ultimately use the models for forecasting and future planning and so on. So that course again is in mid-December. It's on the CloseReach site now. The CBP Modeler course, which is the technical deep dive into the application, is also there. That's running, I think, in mid-November, and then we have a follow-on. We usually recommend business people take the BPAC course and then do the CBP as a technical course. So that's kind of the sequence. So yeah, thanks, Kevin.
All right. And just as a bit of a plug as well, all of the BPAC concepts were used by Mike and our team, on a variety of different assignments. Mike was working with Veterans Affairs, helping with their intake process for claims. And also, remember all those lineups around the passport offices? We won't say they went away because of the application of BPAC, but
sure they did.
Okay. They did a lot of analysis on the costing and improving those processes. So, it's a worthwhile workshop. And we have a web publisher workshop coming up in November as well. So if you're it's been a while and you need to understand about how to use those new tiles and dashboards and all the new publishing concepts, November course is where you want to be. And November user group meeting, PSPC Real Property Services will be presenting on the work that they're doing to retain corporate memory. So we've had a team working with them in a number of different facets of their organization, real property leasing and a lot of other processes and things. And they've demonstrated sufficiently to their management because of the work that we've done, that we've worked with them, that they should get increased rather than decreased funding for this fiscal and next fiscal. So might be worthwhile attending to see their approach, to go back to your own department to say, look, this is the tool that will save us funding. So you should be increasing funding in this space. So that's all I have.
Marvelous. Okay.
That and the chocolate cake yesterday was great.
I know. That's so nice. Did you bring any in?
Not, of course not.
No, I don't see any in the fridge.
There you go.
Oh. And Denise dropped, Denise, who's newly joined us from PSPC, dropped you a happy birthday in the chat. That was very nice.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Denise.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm 68 now.
You don't look a day over 67.
Funny.
Ouch.
Ouch.
Sorry. Well, we have come to the end of another user group meeting, everybody. Thank you all for your attendance and participation. If anybody has questions about anything, comments, we did this last month. We left the meeting open at the end for a few minutes. If anybody wants to stick around and chat, anybody has any questions about anything that wasn't on the agenda,
open your mic, turn on your camera, and you know, we can have any kind of discussion you want to talk about.
Can have a kumbaya discussion, you know.
We had some people here from that have never been here before, so if you've got any questions, I think there was some from another QualiWare partner.
That's right, we did. We had another QualiWare partner who joined us today. Thanks to Carol for forging that relationship. So otherwise, folks, you're free to drop off as you go. That's the end of the agenda, the set agenda for the meeting, and we'll see you in November, last Monday of the month. Otherwise, just stick around and chat as if you were leaving the room and you're all saying goodbye and bye.
We're looking for a good TOGAF trainer, by the way. If anybody has any personal contacts. First Rand Bank in South Africa has asked us to respond to them with a business architecture training program. So we're putting together our materials as well as Mike Haley's Landmarks, BPAC, and Roger Burleton's into a cohesive business and enterprise architecture training program. But TOGAF has to be part of that, and we don't have a TOGAF trainer. So if you know someone, send them my way, please.
There you go.
Bye.
Okay. Well, everybody
Nice
seems to
evening,
be
everyone.
good. All right. Bye, Brenda. Nice to see you.
Hey,
Bye,
thanks, JR.
Jeffrey.
That was
Bye.
a good talk, by the way.
I think JR had to go.
He left
Maybe
us. Oh, he's still here.
done.
There he is.
No, always here. I don't think so. People. Oh, Phil
Just
has got
to,
his hand up. Come on in.
yeah.
Come on in, Phil.
Yeah. If there's anyone still on the line, I did, as I was listening, did the test on the governance workflow and with the three list, the HTML3 list. And yes, if you have a diagram that is governed with an object that is also governed by the same governance workflow, they will move all together through the governance workflow.
There you go.
Using the, if you use a check mark and you check all of the objects that you want to move with the governance workflow.
So if we're using the tree view, makes it very easy then, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Very good.
Anybody else? Everybody's still, some people are hanging on, but a lot have gone.
All right, everybody. I think that is a wrap.
Nice to see the turnout.
Yeah, it's great, eh?
It was good.
We had a lot of people today, which is great.
There we go.
I think these
All right.
departmental presentations are a real draw.
Yeah.
I think so too. People are very interested in what the other departments are doing, and next month's presentation as well is going to be Manon Savage from PSPC. She's going to talk about what they've been doing in QualiWare. So it'll be very interesting.
Yeah, they got some real good traction from their management team on the work that they're doing.
They got some great feedback in their presentation that they gave this past month. So it was really good. All right, everybody.
Just a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is 10.9 the one with the web interface?
Well, they all have a web interface.
No, that you can run it over the web.
You can run QualiWare on the web. Sorry, do you mean the one that's getting rid of QLM?
I know, but right now, well, the last time I used it, you had to tell a remote into it. Like into a server, remote server.
Nope.
No,
J-
shouldn't
nope.
be. I think you need to talk to whoever's configuring your environment.
I need an update.
I think so. Gerald, you're at shared services, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you guys are quite a few releases behind. You're in
I know.
you're
That's what I'm
yeah.
thinking.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
not
on
sure.
you're on 10.3, and the web modeler in the web
Yes.
interface and the web modeler in 10.3 is definitely not as sophisticated as it is now in 10. I mean, D&D just moved to 10.8 as well. ESDC is on 10.8. I think CRA is in the process of upgrade. So the 10.8 release, the web modeler is come leaps and leaps and bounds.
And you'll want to be taking our new web modeler training
web
course.
modeler course. There you
We
go.
have a couple of people who are trialing it right now. I don't know if they're done yet. Cecile, Tamara.
I only take training if it's free or under $100.
Oh, well, it's pretty close to that, but
there you go.
Anyhow.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. See you all next month.